Good day to you. This is Anagalactic on a Wednesday, March 4th. Over here, you'll see our old friend, that old devil moon. Let's get a good look at the old gal. A little close up here. Oh my goodness. Even just a piece of her, the rest of her being darkened. Isn't she glorious? That is a perfect circle, although you could argue that, of course. The It's really quite an interesting process to get used to superpositional logic because it takes a long time, or at least it took me a long time to realize just how far-fetching this principle is. It ends up affecting everything. You start to realize that superpositionality just recurs in a variety of contexts at a variety of levels. And what is it then? It's simply one thing on top of another is the basic meaning. It's a layering, but then you have to define the relationships within the layering. And that's where it gets interesting. A binary, I guess, I'm not sure if the concept of a layer extends, but binary is a typical form of logic. I would have to say is probably the most well-known form of logic, although historically that would be propositional logic, or what's called rhetorical logic. There are all kinds of levels of logic. And logic is one of those pervasive things. So I guess it came as a surprise to us. It certainly did to those who have encountered it, according to their reports. Their reports match mine. You're stunned. And it just takes, it's a process to learn to cope with being stunned this way. Because we're talking about non-binary, it's non-binary logic in a mathematical sense. And this is being exploited computationally, which again is a source of wonder to me and others. This is exploitable. It's the ultimate explanation for entanglement and such applications as tunneling, which really drives microcircuitry, is this famous variation of the entanglement problem. But all of these problems, which I could describe, but I want to plunge into geometry today, which is my favorite part of this whole range of topics. Science, of course, is huge. It has a huge context, which must be observed in some way because everything fits to everything else. And this goes to levels and all that stuff we talk about in philosophy. But we're not philosophizing when we're talking about structure. So geometry really, I would say, is the science of structure, if I had to just say it as briefly as possible, because it's not numbers. But you see, that's superpositional, because I was taught geometry and numbers, as the number line is famous. The number line, well, you just pretty much summed up everything we know about Euclidean geometry in those two words. Number, line. That is the correct sequence. I mean, I don't know, you could reconstruct it, a line number. You see, both of these terms are redundant. When you say line, you are saying number, which took a long time to realize. Now, if you compute that mathematically really quickly, you get zero, because a line has two infinities that add to zero. Well, that's the Archimedean of the space. So I did promise to give you a formal definition of that elusive term. All it really means is balance. Some words are difficult to approach because they are so, they're so, well, I suppose one could get philosophical, but as I said, I prefer geometry. I mean, logic, of course. Numbers, you're not going to get away from them. So yes, of course, numbers. We don't start with numbers. We start with, the way I was taught it, shapes. But then we rigorously defined the word line. And I do go both up and down when I make a definition to make sure the full context is there for a definition. You have to go back a step to make a definition. Well, as you could guess, that leads to a possible infinite recursion because you have to make up new words to state, and now you're going to have to prove those words, and it just regresses, called an infinite regression. But again, that's logic. What I'm really interested in this old devil moon for the simple reason that that is a perfect geometric shape. And I began by saying perfect, and I do like to talk this way. Now that I know about superpositionality, I realize that nothing I ever say is going to be incontestable because by making a simple statement rather than a dualistic statement where you're comparing two things, if you just make a statement, it's always incomplete. Always. Or you wouldn't be able to state what you're stating, or there'd be no reason to state it. Something like that. But all these bits fit together. I mean, numbers is a pretty big bit bucket, you'd have to admit. It is almost the definition of the bit bucket is numbers. And that would be computational science, which really rose to the fore in the 20th century. Daddy-o, can't we all agree on that? Boy, computational logic just really went wild. And boy, did it have some great results. You're probably looking, if you're watching this video, on a typical instrument of our day, which is 2026. It's 1447 by another calendar. And I just happen to know this, so I just thought I'd share with you. It's not only 2026 today. To a couple of billion people, it's actually, well, they know that it is 2026, I would assume, and they probably prefer it or just don't care because why would you care? So there's two. Okay, though now there's two. It's 2026, and then I guess some underscore 1447. And that would cover both main calendars used on Earth. I would have to say the Muslim calendar has certainly survived the test of time. 1,400 years, give or take. I mean, we're talking that's a significant calendar. It does go back to, I think it's called the 7th century. I always have to stop and figure this out. If I say 7th century, I believe I mean the 600s, right? It always sounds queer to me because this is the difference between something like cardinality and ordinality, is that you can have the 0th year. Well, you actually have to. Because the years from 0 to 100, that's not, you, well, what if you called that the first century? Okay, well, that's strange. Because in the second century, you see what I mean? It's just confusing. So geometry is a simplifier for someone like me who's obviously not numerically coordinated. I think that's putting it fairly. That's kind of gentle. I mean, I don't do mathematics. I mean, it's just as simple as that. I've never denied that. And yet, I certainly found an attraction to the basics of mathematics. Arithmetic is the process of writing out mathematics. So I was pleased to learn the difference between arithmetic, which is the action, and mathematics, which is what you're acting with. You're using mathematics in writing. And that's arithmetic. When you're doing mathematics, it's arithmetic. Maybe you already knew that, but I'm just pointing out a general principle in science. It's always nice to run across new, useful, it's like something was bugging you, you put it in the back of your head, never did figure out. Does the sun fly from east to west? You just never decided. Sure looks like it. You like do some experiments just to check. Sure, it's up there about 12 hours a day as your final conclusion after years of measurement. No, it varies wildly. It goes up and down in latitude. It has a different arc. You know, it goes up and down. It rotates. It just recesses. There's all kinds of shit. Plus the clouds. Let me tell you, this is the worst place in the world for astronomy. It just, goes on and on. Why don't we move to some mountaintop? So I like astronomy. Well, for good reason. All the great scientists have loved astronomy. Now, that's not strictly true. I actually whenever I run across, a great scientist, and he had a chance to use a telescope and he just went, nah, no, I could do without that. No, I have my microscopes. My work is focused. But I'm sure it happens. Oh, why am I so sure? Human race. The human race will produce any anomaly that it can. I think we all have to bow in the direction of that goddamn idol. But, well, not literally, or you lose your soul in some context, and nobody wants that. So I was just using a really extended metaphor there. I don't mean bow in the direction of any idol, but I mean we do play these games, you know what I'm saying here? You got philosophy, you got religion, you got mathematics, you have numbers, then you have objects. Well, then you see that there are objects in the sky. Well, let me just remind you of our guest here. I invited Her Highness to visit us, and she said, no, you're the one who never looks. Oh Christ, you're religion land all of a sudden. She didn't say that. She loves me. I think the moon loves everybody. Does that make me an idolater? You see, this is why I brought it up. You have to ask yourself, do I worship the fucking moon? Because that really would be a horrendous thing. Do I give her a name? Do I give her an identity? Do I worship her? Do I bring her things? No. No. And in fact, lately I have been totally neglectful of our solar system. I'm supposed to be a guide. I've said so. Well, supposed to be, I think, yeah. Well, I think most of us fall into that general category. We're all kind of in the same boat here. This is not easy stuff. Okay, not everybody delves into like numbers. you know, there's a certain group, and I would say I've observed this in my own family, my sisters. They're like mathematics? No. And that's it. There is no logic, there is no approach, there's no window, there's no like negotiation table. It's mathematics, numbers, like it's a whole list of words that I really like. And they just hear these words and they've learned these are trigger words for our brother. And F that, man, no. No. And I'm like, you get like a complex of, why are you always like, now I can't, they get sad, they're confessing. No, I'm sorry, I know it's unfair, but I just fucking hate, and they just go ranting off about, calculus. I hate calculus. And I'm like, did I? No, you didn't. They start crying. Fuck. I don't know. You love your sisters, you just don't know what to do. Because this is irrational. Then you find out they know all about it. They've just been waiting to like weep it out. No, I know. I hate goddamn mathematics. Oh, Jesus, I'm sorry. I didn't really know it's that bad. I kind of do. We all do. I hate mathematics, of course. But for Christ's sake, it still exists. You still gotta go on. Well, I guess like I'm a hero to them. Like, no, they say no, because I forced it out. Or you gotta finally get in an arm lock with one of these gals. You're weeping. Good. You're vulnerable. So now say it. I'm the king, and I'm doing right, and you're lagging. Isn't that right? Yeah. All right. Hey, dust her off, get her a drink. Hey, your sisters, they're used to you. All older brothers are unfair. We're just born that way. I'm sorry. You girls, somehow we're going to carry on our mission. Making sure you know your place. You gals. I think that's why we watch football and play poker. Because you don't see women doing that. Although, unless it's a sportsman's wife, which my mother was, She watched sports. Oh, I don't know. She even liked ice hockey. My mother went to an ice hockey game. I stop and think about it. Well, anyway, we don't want to get off on tangents, but science is engaging. You have to admit, it's fun. Well, this Santa Cruz boy here, when you say fun, that's a trigger word for me, all right. My triggers are all like with green, they're like, go ahead, trigger, trigger, trigger. But some people have these red ones, like flood or angel or apocalyptic writings. Oh. Pseudepigrapha, no. Tetragrammaton, absolutely not. Sabbath, hey, no. Okay? So then, nobody wants to hear from me at all. Like, these are my two favorite subjects, which I think is quite balanced. I like religion, I'm all there. And I don't like to be entrapped by Mormons, but whatever. Everyone has their own bugaboo, your own Achilles heel. Oh, dance with it, dearie. You're going to have it for all eternity, probably. I'm just saying. Listen, I'm a fun-loving, kind-hearted, religious logician. There. See, when I summon the image of my sisters, it's like this presence. This is always beneficial. Well, that's why I do it. Oh, you learn it's like that Pavlovian rat. It just keeps pressing the button because it gets something in its genitals. That's how I was taught. You just see it. Oh, yeah, it works. Oh, it looks like me. I'm that rat. I just have to keep. Oh, that rat is doing fine. I like learning from this experiment. So I love science. I like rocks. Fuck. There's gems. There's crystals. I went nuts about crystals. Looking back, fuck. I was one of the first because no one else was doing what I was doing. I decided that smoky quartz was holy. This is before I knew anything about God, Jesus, Bible, way before that. I saw smoky quartz crystals, and I think I felt something. And I just would do a lot to see crystals, man. And you say, oh, I learned about libraries this way, and they have picture books. What? And then, because you're a young boy, you study parasites, and you see the world's ugliest, goddamn, you scream. You go nuts. You throw the book across the goddamn corridor. Like those fucking, and then you tell your bros about it. Now we're all just studying parasites. And we have better and better stories about these horror stories about what happens to people. There's photos. This is what, the good guys, we all tried to do this, but this is precious commodity. Like, what do oh, look at this. Here's a tick's face. Just, oh my God, no. We're just barfing, screaming. That's how boys bond, I guess. Anyway, I didn't think this was going to be geometry when I started, but it is. Because we have the moon, this is our guest star. There's a good pun. Here's our guest star, which is not a star, because that's not her own light. That's the light of her friend, the sun. What is the shape? Well, it's superpositional, so you could say circle, or you could say sphere. And somebody's going to argue with you, whichever one you say. So you're screwed. So that's the end of Astronomy 101. You're never going to be right. As soon as you learn that, you can go on because it's a battery. It's a labyrinth. You're going to fall into traps. You're going to find yourself hanging by one ankle. You won't know who you are at some times. It's just going to be upside down. I mean, which side of the moon are you looking at? Do you even know if it's right side up? I'm asking myself that. All these questions I ask you, I ask myself. And usually you probably will know and I won't. So that's why I do bring up these quizzes sometimes. What are those big dark spots? Let's get a close up of that. It's our guest star. We do want to just introduce her anyway. What are those big C's? Well, obviously, the moon is covered with half fluid, it's black, and the other half has giant swimming pools for what appear to be huge civilizations of round people. And they live on the surface, but they never move. Oh, yes, they do. Over millions of years, those fucking craters are just wandering all over the planet, and they actually are trying to gather at these watering holes. Oops, I'm okay. So, geometry, yes. Isn't it about time we got into the geometry? Haven't I been promising you this? Well, this is my favorite part, so I am delaying. Because foreplay is everything, and that carries over into a lot of areas. And I hope I'm speaking to an adult audience, okay? That's a perfectly good metaphor among consenting adults. I added the word consenting as some kind of convention. I believe in assent and consent both, yes. In all phases of life. Assent, consent, yes, yes. So sometimes that's violated. Oh, we don't talk about mathematics here. You can't name Albert Einstein or everything just shuts down like someone threw a giant power switch, at the grid because of you. Oh, okay, I guess I won't. Oh, now there's restrictions. You got to be cautious. You got to watch your step. Oh, we don't. Oh, the flood? Yeah. God, no, sir. No, sir. Nah. And that goes for math and it goes for, well, my two favorite subjects are basically geometry, which includes astronomy. Well, really, it's astronomy because that's true of every man, but so I'm not really saying anything. Everybody loves astronomy. Well, it's worthwhile to spend some time wondering, I would have to say, why that would be the case. Because everybody is. Kepler? I don't need to go on and just make a list of millions. They just look at the sky and are just, their lives are changed. I think this happens to us at a very young age. So I believe our guest star, I like this now, and let's just change my aspect so I'm way further over here. So we can just get a good look at our guest star and lift her skirt a little here. I'm sorry, but I am from Santa Cruz. I did mention that, I hope. All right, so this comes all the way. Oh my goodness. What a spread. Okay, this may go on, but I apologize ahead of time. I am studying to be a comedian, which I think takes an infinite amount of time. That's my theory. I'm working on it. Probably be working on it a long time. Well, you got to have one project like that. Now, those are called C's. And I think you know what I'm talking about. Not the big inky area where, where reality disappears. There's nothing there because since you can't see it, quantumly it's not there. If it's black, if it's opaque, if it's dark matter. Well, we just discovered dark matter. You're looking at it, it's as dark as matter can get. It's called a shadow, but I don't go into alchemy. I don't delve. I don't dawdle, dabble. I don't dingle. Okay, I just don't. And I don't care what it is. Because we're looking at the C's, and I hope I'm using this pointer right. I think I am. And those two things, the tits of the moon. We could call those the tits of the moon. And she has some birthmarks around her tits. Okay. So there's the mnemonic, a good word to know how to spell. And these are called C's. And I just really am interested in this part of the moon right now because those are C's. And I think you can tell, certainly they are, except for that splatter mark. And let's use the old pointer again. Am I using it right? I pray I'm using it right. That. that's right in the middle of that arm of that sea. So I wouldn't say that's water. I don't think it's fluid. I don't think it's liquid. I think it's rock. And they landed on the same thing somewhere else, and it is rock. So that's not a sea. But here's how you know it's not a sea. There's another crater, which, if it were in your pool, would take about 10 million years to like subside. So that's a splash that's going to take a long, long time to unsplash. And that's called entropy. And I just learned this word entropy. And I know you may pity me. Oh my God, you're just learning now about entropy? Well, that in itself is an example of entropy. It took me this long to even understand what they're talking about because I looked it up like a bazillion times, okay, a dozen times. Over the decades, I looked it up and tried to understand entropy because everybody mentions entropy, it seems. And I just was like curious. And I just each time gave up very quickly trying to understand entropy because it doesn't seem to make sense. What they're not even sure what they're trying to say, it turns out. And so I just give up quickly, or at least at that phase of my life, which was repeated. Same with the calculus. Try it again. Get a couple of books. First, I have to scour like 24 titles. Select two and read the introduction to each, just to start. That may take 2 days. God only knows with my schedule. And then I try again. Just delve in, dig. Just try to learn like anything. I don't care, just something. And pretty quickly, just give up, just close, just give up. Just burn the bridge as we just leave and never come back until another decade and try again. Same with the book of Revelation. I'm a Bible scholar, I know. We're a dying breed, but there's others. Oh, yeah, there's actually tens of thousands of us who still exist. I didn't know that. I thought I was alone. Like on the ark, that kind of feeling. Like, what? I mean, good thing the poor man had 3 sons, and the 4 women were there too. So, I mean, but he did plant pretty quickly, and of course, grapes. I'm sorry, but I don't know how quickly it grows, but he got drunk. Oh, yeah, Noah, he did. And I don't want to get a curse, okay? I didn't make fun of him. In fact, like father, like son, I'm just saying. I mean, if you're on a denuded planet and there's this boat that the aliens, Enoch says this. Oh, the aliens help build it. Fuck yeah! I said, I'll bet the aliens were. Well, now Enoch says you were right. So that might not make me a prophet, but it makes me a prophet's ally, a friend, because I'm making predictions and then I find out the fucking prophets back me up, so I was right. Well, you don't get many of those. I would have to offer that. So that's a good one. So, there's a lot of taboo subjects. And it just depends on your crowd. You just don't bring up certain subjects, but it varies from crowd to crowd. And with my sisters, I already gave you that example, but there's numerous examples of the same scenario. We've all been through it. Like, oh, we really don't use that kind of language here. Oh, what kind of language do you use then? You know, do you have a pamphlet? I need to study your kind of language because I was using a common language. No, we don't talk about mathematics here. You're allergic to numbers then. It's a very common malady. I understand that, then you start going on and on about something that might be more feminine, I guess. Like, here's how to make your health improve then. Oh, you don't have to suffer from mathematitis, no. You just learn to talk naturally like I do. And that's why I use that kind of language, youngin'. I start rising up. Well, I told you my sister's presents, and I always include them both because I love them both. And they love each other too. But, in families, there's ups and downs, right? Sisters fight, brothers and sisters tussle. It's fucked. you know, because when your parents die within 2 months of each other, families can come unglued. And our family was afflicted with that nasty syndrome where just suddenly our family just disintegrated. It doesn't last. Well, thank God it doesn't last. Although it depends on what you mean by that, because some things do last. And then you have to deal with that. It's like having new cargo on your already overloaded boat. It's like now you have something new to deal with that wasn't there before. You may just tend to push it away with 2 feet, Just nah, nope. And you find yourself doing the same thing. And we all have a list of those. It goes both ways, is what I'm saying. You don't really want to restrict speech. You don't want to hinder communication. However, we are social beings. So, it's not up to like, oh, there's Charlie. Well, we know what we're going to talk about now. And yet, there's always one, isn't there? And I mean, all of this is a learning experience. But if you're talking about geometry, let's be honest. Who the hell would be interested in geometry? Well, that's why we have our special guest star. I'm really getting used to this now. Our special guest star, Miss Luna. And she has a pair down there of C's. Those are called C's. And they're remarkably clean of meteorite strikes. And I may have given a dissertation or two on the difference between meteor, meteoroid, meteorite, and meteor anything. I think those are the big three. Well, it's down to just one now. Meteor is no longer really used, although you sometimes hear meteor. It means meteorite. Meteoroid means meteorite. And so the three words now are the same. Not quite, because you do have three words, you might as well use them. So they should be distinct. Otherwise, why do you have a separate word? So this goes deep. I mean, we're into linguistics, which is quite a subject. Languages? Oh my God. The languages of Earth. Where do they come from? Who invents writing? There are like about 8,000 forms of writing. Who comes up with a writing? There's Chinese. Where does that come from? You have Roman characters. How did that happen? Where did they come from? You trace it back. Where do those come from? Well, who thought it up? Why are there thousands? Why are there thousands of languages? It's not just the writing, it's the speech. And Tom Wolfe's Kingdom of Speech. You have to read that book. It's by one of the greatest authors of all time. By everybody's standard, there's no exceptions to the real greats. Tom Wolfe, who, by the way, is not Thomas Wolfe, who is earlier in time, essentially. But Tom Wolfe wrote The Right Stuff, which was made into a very good movie. He also wrote The Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test, which is a landmark of literature. It's an absolute fave-rave among critical pros. You can't help but love that book. There's just no way to not like that book. Well, that's how Tom Wolfe writes. But just before he died, which was in 2018, if I recall correctly, he wrote one more book, but it was on science, and he entitled it The Kingdom of Speech, and it featured Noam Chomsky, whom everybody looks up to, but not everybody looks up to Noam Chomsky in the same way, because every man has his flaws. And among philosophers, you're going to have enemies. And it just depends on the level of intensity, I suppose. When you discover that a scientist is wrong, you've got to be cautious about stepping on that scientist's toes because the scientist has a reputation for being right. And you don't want to call someone in that position wrong. Them's fighting words. But if it's done properly by a journalistic pro, uncovering an error can be a benefit to all. And to Noam Chomsky's favor, and I honestly am contrite about this because I've not been on Noam Chomsky's side and everything, pretty obviously. And that's normal, but it's also dangerous to be accusing a man of being wrong when it's his right to insist that he's right, and you say he's wrong. Well, you're going to have a conflict, perhaps. There doesn't have to be a conflict. That would be called true science, where men never conflict. Well, we don't live in a world precisely that ordered that way. And so men do get reputations. Some men get extraordinary reputations, like Albert Einstein, or perhaps John D. Trump. Our president currently in the United States, I guess is just a generalization I'll never shake, but I prefer to say your president, since I'm talking to someone who is much more likely to even care about John D. Trump, which is his real name. Is John. It's not Donald, it's John. It's John D. Trump. The ugliest man I think I've ever seen. And I saw him on the David Letterman show. And so when he ran against Hillary Rodham, and I didn't know who John D. Trump was. I didn't know that he was the man that I had seen on the David Letterman show, who was the world's worst guest. And he was the worst guest that David ever had on his illustrious show. And everyone knows that David Letterman is a natural-born genius with a gift for interviewing. Quite a man. I really respect David Letterman, but I'm certainly not alone in that. But back to not Thomas Wolfe, but Tom Wolfe, author of The Right Stuff and the Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test, the Bauhaus Gang, or the Pump House Gang, Mowing the Flak Catchers is one of his famous short pieces, at which he is an accredited master, that too. But his books are killer. They go to the top of the list every time. He's just top notch in every sense. But his last book is still a sleeper. The Kingdom of Speech, which is about the origin of language. Not languages, exactly, but language, the faculty. Where does that come from? The natural selectionists had a definite slant on that. The natural selectionists were kind of forced to extend their theory to account for the development of language, human language. And that turned out to be a tough nut to crack. And to Noam Chomsky's credit, I mean this sincerely, I'm actually a little emotional. He admitted in his old age that he had been completely wrong. And Tom Wolfe reports this. And I checked to be sure, because that's something. For a scientist of his stature to admit that he was an absolute hoax. Not a hoax that he did mean it. He never backed down from that. But he admitted that he was wrong. And that's as rare as hen's teeth. So Tom Wolfe does a very, very good job of explaining, really, for the first time to anybody, what is Darwinism? What is it? It's worth knowing what Darwinism actually is. And Tom Wolfe does the job. That's an immortal service to all humans of our generation. And so I honor right now, naturally, spontaneously, the memory of one of the greatest writers of all time, Tom Wolfe. The Kingdom of Speech is his masterpiece. absolutely outshining all the other books combined because it's science and it hits home. Darwinism needs to be understood. And in the circles that I have been known to habit in my other life, you only live twice, my friend. I was a Bible scholar for decades. I did it for fun. I just did it. I never got paid, and I didn't want to be. I didn't look at it that way. And looking back, I have no idea if there was an avenue open. I may have gotten one offer, but it no, I don't work for the church. That's an error to work for a church. Although I was an overseas missionary. This is the right time to mention that since Ukraine is again in the news, but the only reason Ukraine is in the news is because Russia is already involved in a conflict with NATO. And what they don't need is another conflict with NATO. And I think you can guess where that point of irritation might be. is is like everything is on high alert right now all over the world. Is on maximum alert right now because this could be it. I mean, it wouldn't take much now. And after what we've seen for decades in Gaza, and before that in the West Bank, and before that, oh, Jerusalem, and before that, the ovens, the burning of flesh in Poland, it happened all over Europe. Nazi Germany, just wherever they went, followed the Fuhrer's orders, which included quite an interesting directive about a certain group of people. And it's been pointed out to me many times spontaneously, like I need to be reminded of this. That wasn't the only group he was after. No, he also did not really care for gypsies. And he also had a thing about inferior beings, which really just went against the church's ingrained notion of the divinity of the soul, I guess, but Hitler did not look at things that way precisely. And so his empire, which was destined to destroy Bolshevism, the worst curse the earth has ever seen is Bolshevism, obviously, and fascism had a pretty good chance of reaching Moscow, which was Hitler's main goal, to stop the Jews. He was going to Moscow to stop the Jews. So he really felt, apparently, that since he was going to Moscow to stop the Bolshevik Jews, that he really didn't care for any Jews along the way, because I guess he blamed them all. And the only source of logic behind such a strange extension of logic to just include people who may not even know that the Jews, their own people are in Moscow. Maybe the people in Poland are unaware of that, like they didn't actually send Lenin or Stalin or whoever it is. It just didn't just vote him in and just make sure he's safe. They don't even know who these people are. But no, they're Jews. And so Hitler knew this, apparently. And I checked, he certainly had reason to think so. They seemed to be saying so as they did it. So it was hard for Europe at the time to overlook the fact there do seem to be a lot of Jews involved in the Bolshevik Revolution. It just seems like there's Jew this, Jew that. The British Secret Service had to be compromised because they knew too much. So they were basically taken over. And that's where you get the story of James Bond. I love to tell stories, and the story of James Bond is one of my favorite. This is really good for children, who, by the way, your children may not even know who James Bond is, which is how you realize how old you actually are, is when the kids who don't look like kids, they look like young adults. But from your perspective, they're actually your grandchildren age, and they do not know precisely who the Beatles are. They've heard of them. And these just these names that you grew up with, they are not fully aware of. And that is a sign of age. I'm just telling you, not everything in life is just all chocolate bars. I'll just put it that way. But geometry has kept me going for the past 17 years. My background is in database programming, which is not mathematics, thank God, or I wouldn't have gotten into the industry at all. Oh, the computing industry. I was there with the original Unix machines, although there were several generations of Unix machines before I arrived. They certainly hadn't completed their evolutionary process. They were branching out. Unix was like, take it over, man. Unix was the operating system of the century. But DOS was catching up. There was this guy, Bill Gates, I guess, who got hold of some technology based on a really stupid operating system, just a fumble of clutches and misaligned indexes, is how I would look at it. So I was hired to analyze these, I guess you would call them interpreters, and build databases, which were becoming the vogue. And I had a knack for databases. I just seemed to do it. And everybody suddenly needed a database. So I made my living that way. But that really was my only experience in science whatsoever. Mathematics, I really don't have an aptitude for mathematics. However, symbolic logic is very close to mathematics. And I do have a knack for symbolic logic. I actually read Soupy's book, The Stanford Professor, when I was in high school. I read his book and did the exercises, which weren't easy. These are Stanford level exercises, and you don't just get them. You spend some time figuring them out from what he said in that chapter, because that's why he's asking you, did you understand? Let's see. Which is called learning. And it's work, Daddy. Oh man, is it work. But I liked it. It seemed fun to me. So that's really the explanation for when I look at Her Majesty there, if I may just bow to Allah, because that's his consort. You know what I'm saying now? And he doesn't have any equals. There's no Luna way up there. No, she's way down here, is where she lives. But I'm just saying she because it's easier in certain languages to give her a sexual identity. I don't know, maybe not sexual. Well, she does have those two mare, though, which is two, which every boy knows what every woman has two of. Legs. That's correct. Thank you. And thumbs. And nostrils. Very good. Ears, ear lobes. Oh, yeah. Now you're growing up. Yeah, there's a lot of curves to those gals. They're built right, and some of them, a certain age, they tend to turn into potatoes later, something leaner or more obese, quite common with women since they give birth to children. If I were going to give birth to children, I would want to have the shape of a whale. Although that's probably naive, I'm not a biologist. Although, I mean, you get into these things like DNA. That was discovered in my lifetime. DNA, that's a code. I like codes. I mentioned 666, that's a code. Well, you have to be a Sufi to really have opportunity to see what it might mean, because it's deeper than deep. But it's still there. It's like, well, there you go, 666. You figure it out. And it says so. Here's the mind that has wisdom. This is the number of a man. And suddenly I just got a light bulb flash after trying for decades to figure out the book of Revelation. And that is the number that's in that book. And it's the only place that number is ever seen anywhere, is that 666. It's the number of a man, the mind that hath wisdom. Good luck. Figure that one out, you there, scholar. It's like, wow, holy Toledo. I finally got it. So I'm a happy camper, Try to keep bright and chipper. Always merry and bright. One of my favorite authors, Henry Miller. Here we go with the stories. So no geometry today. That's 50 minutes. Thank you for tuning in. Yesterday we had a news report on the state of global events where I gave you some insight that I think you will not find anywhere else. So if you didn't see that video, you might want to watch it if you'd like to catch up with the times so that you'll be ahead of the times. You do want to be ahead of the times now. It's kind of like riding a wave because the hour is at hand. And I am actually somewhat required to tell you that because that's how the prophecy starts. The time is now. Okay? What time? Stay tuned. This is Anagalactic bringing you the secrets of the universe. We had as our guest star, in the Hollywood sense, one of the signs of Allah, given to all children of all ages. May you be of that frame of mind to enter heaven, as the great master said. You will in no case get past her unless you become as a little child. Keep looking up. We'll be right back.